We're going to move a little bit further ahead in the study of fractions today. There are two new terms, mixed number, improper fraction. At the end of this short video, you're going to know what those mean and more importantly, what they look like. So far, we've studied fractions that we know that a fraction is a part of a number. We know that it's a part of a whole. We know that we need fractions to describe things that aren't whole. So like a half of an apple, a third of a pizza. The whole numbers don't always work. So the fractions are part of a whole, literally smaller pieces, so we can describe things more accurately and more precisely. We've worked with fractions like 1/3, 1 out of 3, maybe fractions like 3/4, 3 out of 4, but all within 1. We've also extended to fractions like 4/4, and we know now that this is a really important fraction because it represents, actually it's also one whole, but this is a whole in fractional form. So we've studied fractions right up to 1. But the reality is, and you already know this because you've seen a ruler, that fractions go beyond 1. If you've measured anything, you know that rulers look like this. There are hash marks in between the whole numbers on a ruler. The hash marks represent fractions. So right here, this hash mark actually represents 6.5. And then this one's 6 1/4, this one's 6 3/4. Hopefully you work with the ruler enough to memorize those in the future. They're not written on there, but they represent fractional amounts, parts of a whole, because everybody knows if you've ever measured something, it's pretty rare that something comes out to be exactly whole in a measurement. Let's measure this red line that I put up here, for instance, and I come right here to 5, maybe hard to see, but that line measures 5 1/4 inch. So I'm going to write that up here because that is a mixed number. 5 1/4 inches. 5 doesn't describe it because it's a little bit longer than 5. 6 doesn't accurately and precisely describe it because it's not that long. So we need the fractional measure, 5 1/4. So see, fractions are used also beyond 1. In fact, every whole number, as we look at them, 0, 1, 2, 3, and on up, every whole number has fractional amounts between them so that we can describe accurately pretty much anything, the length of anything, or the amount of anything, depending on what real phenomenon that you're studying. So this is a mixed number. The reason it's called a mixed number is because it has a whole number and it has a fraction, so it's the two combined. That thing we measured was 5 1/4 inch, which is actually 5 plus 1/4 inch, because it was additionally 1/4 inch longer than 5. But this is the way we write a mixed number. You don't put the plus in between. You just write the two numbers together, and you have a mixed number. This same mixed number is also equivalent to 21/4, which is this exact same number in the form of an improper fraction. In the next couple lessons, we're going to start converting from one to the other, so you'll understand how to get back and forth between them. An improper fraction is defined by the fact that the numerator, the top of the fraction, there's that new term, is larger than the denominator. So numerator is larger than the denominator. That's what makes it an improper fraction. That's the whole definition. It's what you need to know. Now these two equal the exact same measurement. That's important to understand. But sometimes we need, in math, as you get more advanced in mathematics, sometimes you need the fraction in this form to work with it, as we'll see very soon, and sometimes you need the fraction in this form to better work with it. But probably of more significance is the fact that this fraction, mixed number form, is easier to understand. So a lot of times mathematicians or your teachers, it'll seem picky, but they'll want you to put everything into this form as opposed to leaving it in this form. A lot of times when you do calculations, it'll turn out being in this form, and teachers say, sorry, you got to convert it to this form, mixed number, and here's why. It's easier to understand. It's really hard to understand visually what 21/4 of a candy bar is equal to. What does that really look like? How many candy bars? We know it's more than one candy bar, but how many? How much more than one? You see, when converted to this form, we see that it's exactly 5 and 1/4 pieces of a candy bar. So in terms of Kit Kat bars, it's 5 whole Kit Kat bars, and then one more piece of it. So a little bit more than 5. So see, this one's a lot easier to understand. It's a lot easier to interpret, which is why it probably is arguably the more acceptable way to write a fraction that's larger than 1. Although you'll learn later in your math career that this form is more useful when you're actually doing math calculations. But you'll figure that all out in the meantime. So important thing to remember, we're not going to do any practice with this because we're going to start talking about these over the next few lessons. Mixed number has a whole number and a fraction. That's why it's mixed. Again, these terms don't matter that much, but your teachers will refer to them using these terms. And an improper fraction means the numerator top is larger than the denominator, so it's improper. Hard to understand. That's probably a better name for it, is hard to understand fraction. Easier to understand fraction, but I didn't get to name them, so we have what we have.